take the time to do your pricing strategy properly and put your prices up, because it is the most powerful lever you can use to increase profitable growth.
Coffee's for closers only.
So we've established my proposal is sound in principle. Now we're just haggling over price.
Let's see how much we're going for on eBay.
I mean, it's the same as Dunkin' Donuts. Costs 15 times the price.
Welcome to Impact Pricing, the podcast where we discuss pricing, value, and the amazing relationship between them. I'm Mark Stiving, and our guest today is Mark Peacock, and here are 3 things you want to know about Mark before we start. He has been consulting in pricing since 2017 and is currently the managing director of PriceMaker. He's about to release a brand new book titled Pricing for Success, the 7-Step Plan for Winning More Customers at Better Prices. I cannot wait to talk to him about that. He's also a second-time guest. His last appearance was July 5th, 2021. Oh, and he used to run the 2 largest driving schools in the UK, and I'm pretty sure he stopped that because everybody kept driving on the wrong side of the road. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Mark, for that introduction. That's not quite true, but it was a great introduction. So thank you very much for that.
Hopefully the only part that wasn't true was the driving on the wrong side of the road part.
Exactly.
Okay, good,
Yeah.
good. Hey, how did you get into pricing?
So I was in corporate life for 25 years, lots of different roles in marketing, product management, sales, running a P&L, running a business. And so I learned during my time how important pricing was to business success. And when I left 5.5 years ago now, and I was thinking about what do I want to do next, and it took me a couple of months to work this out, but I eventually had my eureka moment, which was pricing. Nobody talks about pricing in the market that I wanted to work in, which is particular is small, medium-sized businesses and entrepreneurs. There's loads of marketing gurus, financial advisors, business coaches, and so on, and they might touch on price, but nobody really specializing in understanding pricing strategy. So I thought that's where I'm going to set my stall out. I know lots of things that I've learned in corporate life, and I've read a ton of books on the subject, so I'm going to help people with pricing. And it's been great. It's a very distinctive niche. And as you know, there's a lot of value that we can add as pricing advisors. So that's why I do what I do.
Excellent. And so then the big question, why did you write the book?
Why did I write the book? That is a really good question. I think I wrote the book for a couple of reasons. I guess the main one was to help get the word out there into the market to my audience in terms of what pricing can do, and show people that actually there are lots of different ways to think about pricing that aren't necessarily difficult or complex, and that can make a real difference to their bottom line, to show the power of pricing, basically. And as I'm a small business, I have myself and a few associates, but communicating that power of pricing is not something that can be done easily. So I thought, well, if I write a book and hopefully sell a few copies, that will get the word out much more easily, much quicker than I can do so myself. And secondly, I guess for my own benefit, to be seen as a thought leader and to help, influence people that I speak to, the clients that I speak to, in terms of them wanting to work with me. So those are the main reasons, I think, Mark.
Yeah, I think those are very good reasons, by the way. I love them. The second one is probably the most useful for you in the sense that people will recognize you as an expert because you have the book and they have a chance to read it. I had a chance to skim through it. Thank you for sending me a previous review copy. I had a chance to skim it. I have to say it's really well written. I didn't read the whole thing, but I read some sections. And what I liked about it is it wasn't consultantese or businessese. It was written in a way that people could understand it. And so now let's talk about the book, because I really went, first off, okay, I had to search for my name. Thank you so much for putting me in the acknowledgments. And you even put me ahead of Herman Simon in the acknowledgments. It's like, wow, do I feel great.
Well,
So you so you can be on the podcast now. Thank you. But tell me the 7 steps. I'm actually sitting here looking at them, but the book is titled Pricing for Success, the 7-Step Plan for Winning More Customers at Better Prices. And you know that everybody who interviews you is going to say, what are the 7 steps?
Yeah, exactly. So I wanted to come up with a framework or a methodology or a model that people can use to help them think about pricing in a strategic sense. Because too often I think people think pricing is just a tactical question. What's the price? How much should we charge? And they don't link it to the strategy of the business. So thinking about your business strategically starts with, as a company, which is step number 1, where do you want to go? So is your goal market share growth? Is it profit growth? Are you looking to seek investment to help you grow? Are you looking to exit your business? All of these questions might have a different bearing on the pricing strategy that you choose. Number 2 is customers.
Wait. I want to pause you for just a second, if I may. I actually love that one, and I teach it when I teach my pricing class. But one of the examples I always love to use is, what if your company says, our goal is to raise ASPs, right? Does that mean the only solution is we have to raise prices? And it turns out it doesn't. What it does mean is that we start discounting a little bit more on things with higher ASPs, and we discount less with things with lower ASPs. And overall, we can raise the overall company ASP without just raising company prices. So I just thought that was a great example that says, once you know your company goals and objectives, you can make really smart pricing decisions.
Exactly. And I think pricing ultimately is always a subset of business strategy, of your company goals. So you've got to be clear. You've got to know where you want to get to. Otherwise, you'll end up floundering, I think, with your pricing. Yep. So that's the first step.
Okay. Step 2.
Second step is obviously knowing what your customers think about you. What do they think about your products and services? What are their needs and wants in relation to what you can offer them? And roughly speaking, how much might they be willing to pay? And as you know, Mark, asking this price question, this willingness to pay question as early as possible in your planning and your new product development activities is really, really important. And it's one that too often people leave right towards the end. And then as part of that customer understanding, you can start to build a picture of different segments within your market. And we all know the traditional approach to market segmentation based on customer needs and wants, etc. But price segmentation is something people don't tend to think about, again, particularly in the small, medium-sized world and entrepreneurs and startups. And actually, when you start to get your head around different levels of willingness to pay and grouping them into segments, you can get a new and very different picture about what pricing strategy, pricing model you can use in your business. So it's really powerful, and it's the best place to start in terms of pricing.
I think it is the hardest thing for companies to get their arms around. So I tend to think of, we do price segmentation inside a market segment. But when we start thinking about who's willing to pay us more, what we usually realize is we haven't defined our market segments properly, right? We haven't figured out who's trying to solve what problems and how do I put the right people together. And so we tend to think, oh, these are small companies, these are mid-sized companies, these are big companies. And so those are our market segments. And it turns out that's probably not the case. So that's fascinating. And I agree completely. That's super important and really hard to do.
Yeah. Then the next step is being aware of your competition. So I term it assessing value. So what are the alternatives that your customers, your buyers might consider other than what you do? What's the product offering? How is it different? How is it better? And how are they pricing it, of course? And also not just direct competitive alternatives, but also indirect alternatives. So reference prices. So if you're trying to sell a CRM system, for example, is your buyer comparing your product to Salesforce, or are they comparing it to an HR system that they recently bought? What is the reference price that's in their mind when they're thinking about your offering? And then thinking about how to define your competitive advantage and linking that back to your pricing. So I think those are the first 3 steps, so company, customer, competitor, and that determines to a great extent your company strategy, your business strategy. Were you going to say something?
I'm always going to say something, Mark. So a couple thoughts jump to mind, but the first one is one of my clients had the greatest example of the reference price that I've ever seen. And he was selling add-ons into Power BI. And it turns out these add-ons are super powerful. But he knew that his max price, he could never charge more than Microsoft gets for Power BI. Right. And so he was limited at this $10 a month or whatever the version of the customer has. And it's like, even though it was way more powerful and worth way more than that, he was just limited at that because that's what Microsoft charged.
Interesting. And there's another great example. I think it's the Michelin tires example. You probably know the story of Michelin came out with a new premium tire, and they felt that the product was worth 20% more than their standard tire, but they didn't think they could sell it at 20% more than the going rate. So they changed the entire pricing model from a price per tire to a price per mile, and ended up with an equivalent outcome of 20% increase in prices. But they wouldn't have been able to do that using the traditional pricing approach. So they completely changed their pricing model to get around the upper limit that people were thinking of, the reference prices, as you put it.
Yeah. And that whole pricing model, pricing metric conversation is a fascinating conversation.
Yeah.
Maybe it's in one of your last four steps.
Yep. So the last four, so the product. So what is the product? How do we define your product offering? And this is important because product and price are two sides of the same coin. When I buy a product for a price, I want to know what I get as a customer. And equally as a seller, you need to know everything that's included in your product offering. And I think all too often people aren't clear enough in terms of their product offering. How do we define what's in your product? A product is just a bundle of features, right? Whether they are soft features, hard features, or whatever they are. It's just a combination of things that you offer a customer. And it also could include a product name. It should have a price, even if the price is free. And it hopefully has a purpose and meets a need. So what is the product offering? And at this stage, we can then do a bit of toing and froing between the product section and the pricing section, because we can use pricing to change how we define our product offering to optimize the pricing. So using things like tiered pricing, good, better, best, bundling, debundling, product funnels, all of these tactics can help improve your final pricing strategy. So then section number 5, sorry, Mark, you were going to say
something. Can't go there yet. So one of the things that I've come to realize, I've always thought of myself as a pricing expert, but I've come to realize that pricing and packaging go hand in hand. You just can't separate the two.
Yeah. Now,
maybe in the world of hardware, you make the packaging decision or the product decision up front, and then you figure out how much am I going to charge for it. But when you start moving into software type things, we can move features from one package to another with a click of a mouse.
Yeah.
And so suddenly these packaging decisions are fascinating. And and when we understand customers' willingness to pay or the value they get from these different features or packages, it helps us drive pricing helps us drive how we package our products.
Exactly.
So I think that's amazing that you put that in there. Okay. Exactly. Now you can go to number 5.
Yeah. So number 5 is pricing, where we all want to get to with this topic. But within that, what do I mean? There's a whole series of things to address, but principally it's what pricing strategies are we going to use for our product offering in line with what our customers want from us and what they're willing to pay, and keeping an eye out from what the competition are doing. So pricing strategies, and in the book, I have a section or a table that describes 50 different pricing strategies. And the point of showing that table is to get people to realize that there's lots of different ways to do pricing. If you can accept that there are thousands of different marketing strategies to help you grow your business, can you also accept that there are, or maybe not thousands, but certainly hundreds of different ways to do pricing? Yet too many people are stuck on cost plus margin pricing, competitor-based pricing, or hourly rates or day rates, and they're missing out on a plethora of other pricing strategies that are out there. And within that, of course, so you touched on it a minute ago, what pricing metric are we going to use? What price ranges, thinking from low to high, can we identify for our given market segments and our customers? And then how do we design a choice of prices so that we're presenting the best possible set of pricing choices to our target market, to our customers, to help them make the best possible choice for their needs. So that's what I mean by pricing in that framework there, Mark.
What do you think about having more than one pricing model for a product? And I'll give you a quick example. For buying a car, I can now buy a car. I can take a loan out for buy a car. I can lease a car. And in some cases, I can subscribe to a car. Right. And each one of those are different pricing models.
Yeah, I have no issue with it. I think it's fine as long as the owner of the product is clear what all of those different pricing models do and what their purpose is. So presumably they each are serving a slightly different segment of the market that they're targeting, and there might be different levels of willingness to pay. And maybe there's a slightly different cost structure, maybe. But I don't have a problem with that. And I think in the book, some of the examples that I've talked about with clients that I've worked with, where they've moved from a very simple pricing model, cost plus margin, to a new pricing strategy, which takes on 3 or 4 different new elements to create a new pricing strategy, pricing model that's unique to them. So I think as long as it's carefully done and isn't overcomplicated, and to the individual buyer at the point of purchase or consideration is simplified in a way that it makes it easy for them to make a buying decision, then I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I think that's the key, is we have to be able to explain it and make it simple for the buyers to make a decision.
Yeah.
So
once you've got
excellent.
that far in your pricing model, then it comes into, well, how do we take it to the market? How do we present it to our customers, to our market? So that section number 6 is called proposition. So being clear on your value proposition, which for me is very simple. It's what are the main reasons somebody might buy from you? And then in this section as well, I like to bring in some of the ideas from the psychology of pricing, which I know you know about, but I think many people don't. Many businesses don't understand the power of how to use price anchors, decoy pricing, nudging, priming, all of these different techniques that are quite simple to use. And once you get your head around how they work, they can be tremendously powerful in terms of how you present and propose your prices to your market, whether it's on a website page, whether it's in a brochure, whether it's in a proposal document, or whether you're just articulating it in a face-to-face conversation. All of these techniques can be very powerful in terms of how we communicate the value of what we do and what we offer.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. I often get into fun little disagreements with pricing people, and I make fun of behavioral economics. It's important, but it only is important after you understand value, after you understand how customers are making these decisions. So, but yes, it really is important. I'm glad you included that.
Yeah. Well, that's why it's on number 6 in my wheel, if you like. I like to use the examples from behavioral economics because they bring the subject of pricing alive, don't they? Because people go, wow, that's amazing. When you talk about price anchors and decoy pricing and things like that. But actually, in terms of implementing them, as you say, they should come towards the end of the cycle once you've worked out the strategy. Completely right, Mark.
What's your favorite behavioral economics example? I'll share mine after you do.
Well, I mean, there's a load of classic ones, and Dan Ariely has named a few in his book. So the classic example of The Economist magazine and the decoy pricing, and how without changing the actual prices, you can achieve a 40% increase in revenue by changing how you present the prices on a page. And the use of the decoy price, the $125 price for print-only access to the annual or subscription of The Economist is a great example of that, because it just shows people how counterintuitive pricing can be, because you'd never sit down and then design that as a pricing menu, right? Because it just doesn't make sense until you understand the psychology, how people are making a pricing decision when they look at that kind of menu. So that's always a favorite that I use in talks, Mark. How about you? What's your favorite?
That is a good one. I like Richard Thaler. I'm going to give Richard Thaler credit. I think it was him who did this one. And it was the beer on the beach study, where you would ask somebody, you and your friend are both at the beach, and you say to your friend, hey, I'm going to run into this fancy resort and buy a beer. If it's more than this, more than some number, I won't buy it. What's your top end number? And so they give you some number, and I can imagine me sitting here, it's probably $10 or something like that, right? Somewhere in that ballpark. And then imagine the exact same scenario where he says, hey, I'm going to run down to this corner convenience store and I'm going to buy a beer. What's your top end price for that?
Yeah.
Right. And it's much less than $10, right? It's probably $2 or $3.
Yeah.
And there's no difference. It's somebody handing you a beer on the beach, but it has everything to do with framing and what you believe, what your reference price would be on that one.
Yeah, that's a great example. I'm going to remember that one, because it's all about context, isn't it? And
it is.
Well, where the beer is sold from affecting your perception of value. Yeah, brilliant. Love that one.
And it's about beer, so.
Of course. The other great beer example, just as an aside, is the power of selling high to low. So there's a study, I can't remember who did it, but I quote it in my book, of a beer menu in a bar, and they show their beers listed 1 to 10, prices low to high from top to bottom. So the lowest priced beer is at the top, and the highest priced is at the bottom, ranging from $5 to $10 a beer or whatever. And they do an experiment where they just flip the prices round. So the highest is at the top and the lowest is at the bottom. And what they found over a month-long trial or something was that for every beer sold, they achieved an average increase in selling price of about 4%, just by flipping round the order in which the prices are shown. So people are more likely to buy the more expensive beer just because they're seeing the higher prices first. So without changing the pricing, you can achieve an effective increase in prices of 4% by changing how you present the prices. And I think this whole question of how we present pricing is just as important as what's the number and what's the strategy, because it makes such a difference.
Okay, so now I have to make fun of you because it's not just as important. It is important. But I make fun of all behavioral economics people. Sorry.
Fair enough. You got me there.
Just because I can.
Yeah.
So go ahead. What's number 7?
And then the 7th one is the final one. So it's labeled profit, but what I mean by that is achieving value. So there's no good us having done any of this great work, going through stages 1 to 6, if you can't take it to market and make it happen. So this is typically with the kinds of businesses I'm working with, where the sales teams or the people selling the products and services have to, the rubber hits the road, and they have to take the product to market and they have to make it work. So just having a few basics in place. So having a clearly written pricing policy is such an important thing. And I literally say in my book, write it down. And it doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be complicated. 1 or 2 sides of A4. Just write out what your company pricing strategy, pricing policy is. And if there's a large number of people that need to know it, make sure they understand it. And it forms the backbone of your commercial strategy or business strategy. So being clear on your pricing policy, and then knowing how to measure the impact that pricing is making. So separating out price from revenue growth and volume growth, and making sure you target it and, set your pricing objectives for 5% growth on price, 5% on volume, 3% reduction in cost, and work out what that impact makes on your bottom line. And there's a number of other techniques I talk about in the book for how you can track it using waterfall charts and product volume mix, variance analysis and things like that. But I think too often businesses will just target revenue growth, which is a function of price and volume, and they don't break it down any further than that. So we want to achieve 20% revenue growth next year. Well, is that 20% on volume or 10% on price and 10% on volume, or what? So being more clear on the price growth that you're looking to achieve. Yeah, so ultimately, that's where we get to, Mark. I think if you follow all of those steps, you'll be in a very good place and have a very good pricing policy.
That sounds like a morning's work.
At least, yeah.
It sounds like a huge job. Yeah. I want to push back or ask your perception on the last thing you said. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I always find fascinating is companies. God, I'm going to tie a whole bunch of things together at once. Sometimes we want to do outcome-based pricing, right? So did we generate more revenue? Did we generate more profits or whatever it happens to be? And I always advise against that. And the key reason I advise against that is because as soon as an outcome happens, there are 3 or 4 or 5 different departments in a company who says, yeah, we did that. Right. So when prices go up, right? So average selling prices go up, we in pricing, we like, oh yeah, we did that. And sales says, no. We sold value better and negotiated better. So that was actually us who did it. Right. And marketing says, no. That was us finding the right clients to bring in people who had higher value, who valued our products more. And that was really us who did it. And so it's really hard to say that's pricing. So how would you address that?
Yeah, that's a great example, I think, Mark. And of course, all of those departments have had a bearing and an influence on the net selling price, the average selling price that's achieved. I guess the point I was trying to make, and I am trying to make in my book, is that I would much rather companies were more focused on where they think they want price to get, where they want it to get to in terms of their business plan. And too often, not enough attention is paid on that. So when I'm saying that, I'm saying that from a point of, at this point, I don't really care who's taking the credit for it, whether it's marketing, sales, or the pricing team. I just want the business to be more focused on how are we going to grow our business. And growth is simply a function of the number of customers and the number of products they buy and the prices they're willing to pay. So what is the growth plan? How are we going to get there? How many customers do we need? How many products do we want to sell and at what price? How we implement that then falls down to the functional teams, whether it's the pricing department, sales departments, and marketing departments. And generally in the types of businesses I work with, small to medium-sized businesses, they don't have a pricing department. So it generally sits with sales, marketing, maybe a bit of operations, and even a bit of finance sometimes. So getting people to buy into the pricing policy as at a company-wide level, which is everything that I've talked about before that. So the strategies, the product offering, understanding customers, knowing where we want to go is really important. So getting that engagement so that everybody's on board with the core strategy. And I think if we can achieve that, the rest will flush itself out through the course of the year. But I take your point, Mark, in terms of, who takes the credit. I'm not sure. I wouldn't want to be judging that at the end of the year in terms of who made the best contribution to price improvement. I think as long as we know where we want to go and we can measure whether or not we're going to get there, that's good enough for me.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it is let's do this in a forward-looking manner. And when it comes to a backwards-looking manner, we just say, look, it's a team sport.
Yeah.
We all did it.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
exactly. I mean, it's
awesome.
Important to take the learnings, I think, from, how can we do better, whether it's the marketing, creating the brand and the customer demand, the salespeople and their effectiveness and so on. But yeah, pricing is such a multifunction sport, multifunction discipline that everybody has to know, what part they play in that process, I think.
Okay. Mark, you wrote this big, long book, but I'm going to have to ask you this really, really simple question. What's the one piece of pricing advice you'd give our listeners that you think could have a big impact on their business?
Put your prices up.
Ooh, I love that. Yes, raise your prices, especially right now, because everybody expects you to raise prices. Exactly. So it's a really good opportunity. Yeah. But do it carefully.
When I started 5 years ago, Mark, the banging the drum on the need to raise prices was a lot harder, as you will remember. But in the current economic environment with high inflation, both in Europe and the States, businesses are more accepting of the need to raise prices. They don't like it any more than they used to, but they are more accepting of it. So take the time to do, your pricing strategy properly and put your prices up, because it is the most powerful lever you can use to increase profitable growth.
Yep, absolutely. And if you do it smart and communicate it well, your market's going to accept it and you're going to be a much more profitable company.
Yeah, so. Exactly that.
Excellent. Mark, thank you so much for your time today. If anybody wants to contact you, how can they do that?
So best way to find me is on my website, which is www.pricemaker.co.uk, or you can find me on LinkedIn, Mark Peacock, the pricing coach.
Perfect. And we'll have some of those links on the show notes, so that'll be easy to find.
Brilliant.
And to our listeners, thank you so much for your time today. If you enjoyed this, would you please leave us a rating and a review? The easiest way is to go to ratethispodcast.com/impact pricing, and they will guide you through the process. And speaking of reviews, Andrew Jenkins left an Amazon review on my latest book, Selling Value, How to Win More Deals at Higher Prices. Andrew said, "Brilliant. I've been in sales for 30 years and I love this book. I've also never written an Amazon review. The book examines the power of selling value in a way that is easy to digest but powerful at the same time. For example, the principles around will I and which one are what we do every day, and yet they're fundamental in the sales process. I've always believed that price is not an objection if the buyer places value on what's being offered. However, the person selling need to achieve this, often in competition and with a product in a busy marketplace. Mark helps navigate these issues on a clear and logical way. For anyone already experienced in sales or just starting out, Selling Value is a must read." All I can say is thank you, Andrew. I really appreciate that. And finally, if you have any questions or comments about this podcast or pricing in general, feel free to email me, mark@impactpricing.com. Now, go make an impact. Don't forget to attend our workshop, How to Fearlessly Raise Prices Now. Go to impactpricing.com/RPN.